Hello and welcome to our latest video, Sociology through Analogy. This is something I've wanted to do for a long time, and a big thanks to Shortcuts TV who produced a sheet on this recently and inspired me to actually go ahead and make this video. So following what they've done, I've put together all the analogies and explained them hopefully for you. So you may be wondering what I mean by this. This is something from your English lessons. An analogy, it's to compare. And you compare to help you understand. So in sociology there's a few models, a few ideas which may help you understand a perspective or a belief or a hypothesis a lot clearer, and that's what I hope to go through with all of these different analogies today. These aren't intended for you just to copy them down and use them. You need to come up with ideas, think behind them. Why does the sociologist use this analogy? What are they trying to get across? And help that as a starting point in your essays, help that as a starting point in your understanding. Sociology is a science. Now you may be thinking of the scientific method, and that's good because that's what should be in your mind, and you may be thinking of Durkheim, but actually Auguste Comte came up with this idea, and you could see him as maybe a forerunner to sociology rather than a sociologist perhaps, but Comte had a massive influence, huge intellectual presence in Europe, and he talked about the idea that sociology should study the world like science studies the world. So if you think of biology, chemistry, physics, and the scientific method, so it's not that they literally, should be putting people into test tubes or something crazy like that. It's a methodology. It's an idea of you observe the world, you check what's going on, you make hypotheses based on your results and what you can prove. So this appeals particularly to big picture sociology, to sociologists that like to be able to show things through patterns and through numbers. But it's really useful, and when we talk about sociology as a science, that is an analogy which you really want to think about. What does that mean? Because obviously we have experiments in psychology which are a lot easier to kind of bring up examples about. In sociology, experiments maybe is not as useful as a research method, but as an idea, as a methodology, the scientific method is really, really powerful. So this comes all the way back from Comte and is very, very early on in sociology. Carrying on here then with the idea of science, functionalist idea of the organic model of society. So society is like a human body. The institutions are organs or body parts. So for example, the family, education, law, government, etc., etc. They're all distinct parts of a societal body, if you like, and if one of those parts suffers or even fails or dies, it can harm or even kill off a society. So as an analogy, this is really powerful. I've often seen students sort of furrow their brow or look a bit confused by this, or maybe not agree, and I understand why. I'm not saying it's right, I'm not saying it's wrong, but it's a really interesting analogy because societies, like bodies, they change over time, and they do die sometimes, and they do leave memories, if you like, or lasting impressions and influences. So from a very, very large scale kind of human history perspective, it works quite nicely too. Again, functions really favour this because they see everything fitting together. A healthy society immediately draws the idea of a healthy body. So if you think about it, it's a very neat analogy, it's a very nice model, and it can help also with criticism of functionalism, because you can say, well what about this, or how about that, and talk about why society is distinct from a human body. But if you think of sociology as the study of people, then it's a nice little analogy to come back to, isn't it? Another analogy that functionalists like is the warm bath idea. This is one that students seem to always really remember. Parsons came up with this idea, the idea that the nuclear family, Parsons was really talking about, is like a warm bath. And if you look at him there, he's looking very relaxed, so that's a good way to remember it. The family provides security and comfort. It's like soaking in a warm bath almost, because it's there to de-stress you. You can even go a bit further and say it kind of washes away outside of the home, work life, the stress of work life. A Marxist might pick that up and go with that perhaps. So Parsons likened the nuclear family to a warm bath because of its kind of restorative properties, if you like, or the fact that it helps in kind of the ritual of everyday life as well. You can make your own mind up about all of these analogies and how useful you think they are. I do think it's a little bit, I was going to say wishy-washy, but that sounds like a terrible pun. I think for me, it's one that's easy to remember, but it's also one, again, that's very easy to criticise because of, the fact it's an analogy, it's an idea, right? So Edmund Leach, I'm going to feature twice with circuits and serial packets. It's an anthropologist, Leach, but really important to sociology too. He has two analogies when it comes to the family. The idea that a dysfunctional family is part of all of our disconnects, really. It's like a circuit. The family turns our attention inwards on ourselves and our flaws, and you can see this in the serial packet family as a media kind of image of the perfect family. So the fact that dysfunctional families are like a circuit that's broken almost, that doesn't quite work, and you need to fix something to make the whole thing work, is a really interesting idea. And then if you think about the idea of the serial packet family, and the nuclear family should be perfect and is perfect, and we should all aspire to what we see on TV, it's a really interesting, almost interactionist point of view where it makes us reflect on the family too. So quite a negative view on the family from Leach in two different ways, but two really good analogies that you can use. And you can compare that to the functionalists and say, well, what is a dysfunctional family? Is it a non-nuclear family? Does a serial packet family have to be nuclear? And you can really go into sort of A-level territory here with your answers. The correspondence principle from education seems really simple to understand, and it's very, very, very clear. School mirrors the workplace. That's what Bowles and Gintis are saying. If you look at the picture of school as kind of like a mincing machine or a sausage factory or something like that, where it mushes everyone, it turns everyone into the same material, and that material is workers, essentially, the proletariat. We see this in popular culture, we see this replayed many, many times over. Bowles and Gintis were obviously studying American schools, but that doesn't mean that it's not universal or applicable, at least to our schools and to our system. So the idea of rules, uniform, timekeeping, authority, it's just like being at work. You literally have work to do while you're there, and even in the case of school, you have homework too if you don't finish everything. So school is designed to make us into workers. You can even extend this and say, well, are elite schools designed to make those children ownership class, bourgeoisie? Or is that their parents, is that their family? So you may want to take this idea and really examine it and go in further with it and ask yourself, well, what about social mobility? What about changes of class? Are those just the exceptions to the rule here? Is it a really strong analogy, or does it only really work in the past? Is it no longer that way? Did it ever work at all? So I think this one is fairly self-explanatory and students always remember it, but it's just one that you don't want to lose sight of it when you're talking about education. It's a very easy Marxist idea to come up with. Okay, another really common idea, and one that students seem to latch onto, is the self-fulfilling prophecy. We particularly see this in education and in crime. You may want to talk about it in all of the modules, from family and the idea of socialization, and social stratification, the idea of class. But if you take Becker as an interactionist and Merton as a functionalist, they might see the self-fulfilling prophecy slightly differently. It used to be called the Pygmalion effect, or it still is called the Pygmalion effect, I guess, but it's more of an older term for it. The Pygmalion is a play, and in the Pygmalion, one of the main characters kind of shows you can make people into what you want to make them. You can mold people. You can be molded. Labeling is kind of the mechanism which Becker identifies, really. It impacts your behavior, it impacts your self-esteem. When you're labeled, you adopt this master status, you become stigmatized or stereotyped. We often think of the self-fulfilling prophecy as negative, but it can be positive too. So, for example, if you're told you're a troublemaker, if you're told you're no good, you're going to do badly at school, you're going to act out, you're going to get involved in crime, etc., etc. You can go down a very cliched, very easy path to understand, but vice versa. If parents and teachers tell you how brilliant you are and how wonderful you are, you might be the model student, you might go on and do really well. So self-fulfilling prophecy, you often see diagrams of cycles and circles and it building up in layers. It's quite an easy one to understand. One thing that students often fail to do when they apply this is to know, does it mean the same for everyone? Does everyone always complete a self-fulfilling prophecy, or does it actually not come to pass? So that's just the one word of caution I would say there. Okay, this next analogy is not something which is really on the GCSE spec, as it were. It's not something that you may cover, but it's really powerful, and I think it's really interesting. So it's the idea of the looking glass self, and it comes from Charles Cooley and interactionism. So looking glass is kind of an old-fashioned term for mirror. You may think of Alice in Wonderland, or the follow-up book, Alice Through the Looking Glass, kind of refers to that. But it's really prescient today with the idea of social media. So this sense that we get our self-identity by looking in the mirror, as it were, and we get this through our expectations and our behaviour and experiences with others. And we reflect on that quite literally, and then we project that back out, and it's reflected to us again and again. So if you think of looking in a mirror, as it were, and you see yourself, and you might not see what you want to see, or you may well see something that's not there. And in the era of social media, the fact we pretty much have a metric for how others see us, through likes, through clicks, through all the different reactions to social media posts, and this behaviour of putting up pictures, putting up different ideas of us to express ourselves is really, really key to the social media experience. And I think Cooley's looking glass self comes back here. But there's also the alternative that actually we think everyone's looking at us, we think everyone is judging us perhaps, when actually they're not. They're getting on with their own lives. They might be so wrapped up in themselves and the idea that they're being judged that we're not really paying attention to each other. So the looking glass self you can think of in link with the self-fulfilling prophecy. You can think of in terms of, it's very much small scale, looking outwards is a very interactionist idea, and you can compare it to all the other analogies that we've used which really deal with the whole of society on a large scale, and think about what that means. But if you come up with an essay or a question where you're particularly dealing with the idea of identity or self-worth, or something where the individual is key to the answer that you're trying to get across, this looking glass self might be a really powerful analogy to help you unpick that. The last analogy I'm going to leave you with is the one of the fruit bowl. And this is the idea that society is a bit like a fruit bowl when it comes to perspectives and maybe research. So depending on your position, when you look at a fruit bowl, you'll see different fruits and different amounts of fruit, and you might see them in terms of a kind of a different order, as it were, or a different importance. So if you put a fruit bowl down in the middle of a table and everyone's sat around it, one person can see one side of the fruit bowl really clearly, really easily, but they can't see maybe what's at the back, or they can't exactly identify how many of a certain fruit is there. The person sitting opposite will have the mirror image, as it were, the complete different view. So that can explain sociological perspectives, that can explain also your position in society, so you can use this analogy in different ways. So if you're thinking of social class, the further you are away from society, as it were, the lower class you are, the less your view is going to be, the less informed your view is going to be, the harder it is going to be for you to see what's going on. Likewise, if you're very close to the fruit bowl or you're above it, again, we're getting into the idea of being very poetic of analogies. You can see more, you can see different things. So it's a neat little analogy to help you understand why perspectives are so different, why some people are so in favour of one thing and others are so against it. And that's throughout sociology, that's throughout many, many different disciplines. But I think the fruit bowl is a really nice way to finish this video. Now, again, these analogies are not meant for you just to stick them in wholesale into an essay and expect to get marks. They're to help you understand concepts and ideas, break them down and use them to compare, contrast, criticize all of these ideas, and really, take them and make them better. Get the details from them and really improve your writing through that. As always, if you have any questions, comments, leave them below, leave them on the classroom, come and see me, etc, etc. I hope this is a really useful video. It's really fun to make, something that I really enjoy. Thank you.